and just wait for it.
Right.
Take the microphone, if you will. And
I will.
Oh, you will. So yeah, that's just some speculation, some thoughts.
So there's like kind of a handful of our, I guess, overarching kind of larger critiques at this point, and about pride. And that's not to say that we hated it. It's that there's a separate struggle that still goes on for different parts of our community writ large, right?
Yeah.
We're not even talking about the complete erasure still of intersex bodies at LGBT prides or queer events, what have you. Whereas, for instance, at Tower Grove, there was much more in terms of product, in terms of focus on LGBTIQ product, or at least focus that was really saying like, hey, we also cater specifically to us, to this community. And so, yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, that being said, I'd like to go and transition to a rough transition into a few of our three little kind of brief news stories, if you will.
Let's do it.
So, as you all know, I would hope that you would all know by now, the Supreme Court of the United States of these Americas struck down or overturned key parts of the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, as well as ruling Prop 8 to be unconstitutional. And so, of course, there's a floodgate of same-sex marriages taking place in California.
Yeah.
The striking down of DOMA really specifically states that any state that recognizes marriage equality or same-sex marriage, also now those individuals or those couples now get federal benefits as well. This also means that there's a large fight in terms of those states that do not recognize marriage equality to still be fighting for those particular folks to access whatever it is that they want, whatever it is that they need. And part of this question is, and I turn to Mason Davis, who is the executive director of the Transgender Law Center, and he does some really great, what I consider progressive work around trans inclusivity, as well as larger kind of projects that kind of intersect with trans bodies. And I mentioned in brief a few weeks ago about this at the closing of a show, but it's becoming much more prevalent now that DOMA's been struck down, that it's advantageous for us to consider what is there beyond marriage that still needs to take place.
Sure. Definitely.
Yes, and part of this movement that the Transgender Law Center is suggesting here is it's a hashtag where you hashtag it through Facebook, Twitter, so that you're linking tons of these photos and images together through an endless stream of hashtag collection. And it's basically, if you find something that's specific to you that's more than marriage, you hashtag it, hashtag more than marriage.
Oh,
and so you would say, for
right.
instance, universal health care, hashtag more than marriage.
Right.
Gender confirmation surgery on demand, hashtag more than marriage, or
right.
access to HIV/AIDS meds, hashtag more than marriage. Because these are items that, while DOMA is now struck down, and while we still have a few states that are still left, and by few I do mean the vast majority, to deal with marriage equality, whether or not you're for marriage equality from a critical perspective, the fact that marriage as an institution has really deeply classist and racist kind of dynamics to it that we need to attend to, that at the same time, these are issues that can be addressed while addressing marriage equality, that they're not mutually exclusive, that it's part of a larger system and a larger process. And so some of the things specific that like the Transgender Law Center, I should say specifically Mason Davis is interested in, are things like universal health care, employment, safety in employment, ways of surviving and thriving as trans bodies or as gender variant bodies.
Basically, we're just saying that marriage does not mean that we've made it. There is still a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's really important to talk about, because I think a lot of people get blindsided, maybe especially people who aren't LGBT.
And and I really want to kind of push this out there, is that when based on wherever your community is at, there is a tendency to believe that the whole world somehow has a shared sense of political sensibility.
Okay.
And when I bring these issues up in various spaces, there's this kind of understanding of, no, we all know that there's more than marriage. No. What people in this particular region that you have access to maybe, no, there's more than marriage. But in the larger scheme of the political terrain, there's a lot of discourse that doesn't have anything beyond marriage equality. There's a lot that doesn't kind of supersede what this might look like. And so the desire for wanting more than marriage is something that we need to be pushing out there and saying that this is affecting all parts of the LGBTIQ community, as well as our cisgender and heterosexual allies. that are out there, and really trying to make these kind of nuanced intersections that kind of affect all bodies, including universal health care, for instance, or employment, or what have you.
Great points.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't even write those down. I heard, yeah. Did you want to talk about our wrestling friend here?
Oh, we could definitely.
Let's do that.
We can definitely go into that. And this is just further examples of how, hashtag more than marriage, you could say, of just problems that are still
Sure.
happening for trans folks in specific. And yes, it's definitely worth celebrating that DOMA gets shot down, but there's definitely still stuff going on that is really important to continue to be talking about. And one of those things is Fallon Fox.
Who is it?
Fallon Fox, who is
Fallon Fox.
Yeah, one of the first trans woman MMA fighter, and who is fighting with other women,
Right.
not other trans women, just other women in general.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of controversy with this, but she was welcomed to fight other women, of course, by professionals that have deemed her woman, you could
Right.
say. And there's been building controversy.
I'm sorry. I think of this committee of these people like.
Okay, fine. You are a woman.
You are a woman.
You may now fight.
Yeah, she's great. She's great because she's very vocal. She seems very positive about her space fighting, from what I see in interviews and stuff like that. So much controversy with her though. A lot of people are just still not having it. She's a great fighter too. She's been very successful so far in her first rounds, which is ultimately, sadly, I have to say, going against her, right? Because you have people saying, well, of course she's winning, and
Right.
they're using her.
And it's interesting
Right.
because that same logic is it's rooted in a deep misogynistic view first. Like there's this layer of women are supposed to be weaker than men, and therefore she is a man, and so therefore that's why she is winning. So while it's misogynistic, it's also trans-misogynistic at the same time in this really interesting layer of.
And by other ways of just strength, it's wit. Not just wit, but I mean just the way you navigate yourself.
Absolutely.
The way you,
Absolutely.
it comes down to a lot of things, and the way that she's being fought for is the results of hormone replacement therapy on the body, and how they change the body, and how they change your muscle mass. It changes everything.
Absolutely.
She's been welcomed, of course, to fight, but they're still going to hold these binary ways of looking at gender against her and trying to get her to not be fighting in the MMA.
And this kind of brings us to, if you don't mind, like kind of the title of our show, Beyond the Binary, and that's that. Maybe you can speak on this too. So for me, for instance, I do not buy into this women are different than men logic. I don't. I feel like there's far more variation between what we call men and far more variation between what we call women than what we call men versus women, as opposed to all these different types of masculinities and all these different types of femininities. And I think as long as we keep kind of shoring up this binary as though it's the only way to conceptualize gender, this type of critique is going to come out, as opposed to she's a type of woman.
She's a type of woman, and that's
that we can find other women that maybe
Right.
are more like her in terms of finding a different way of comparing her with someone that's more. And I don't know who she's fighting. I don't know if they're like completely different, but I would imagine if they're setting up the fight, there's got to be some terrain of you're worthy of each other. You're able to fight each other.
Exactly, and definitely she should not be fighting men. I mean, as far as stigma goes, that would just be wrong to see.
I mean, unless, well, maybe, but I mean, if that's also something that she wants to do, I think that that's something that should be worthy in terms of like, because also barring that kind of co-ed existence still also creates a difference between these different types of bodies.
I would validate that. I would definitely validate that. Okay, so I'm just gonna get to this. There is a campaign that popped up just now in July that is launching a fight for Fallon Fox, and it's just competing the resistance against her. So that's really exciting, They talk about who are #Fallon fighters. You can look that up on Twitter, of course.
Yes.
And they call themselves individuals who are ready to stand up and speak out in support of Fallon Fox.
I like it.
because there have been one too many ignorant comments made and remarks to Fallon. And that's the point, is that they are ignorant. They're trying to invalidate her gender, and they're doing it in light of so much ignorance
That's
on
right.
what
That's
transition means. And it just sheds so much, of course, light on how ignorant they really are, and how people just don't understand the transgender body and what happens
Absolutely.
during hormone replacement therapy, what happens when we're transitioning and stuff like that. Fallon fighters are showing their support by writing.
Mhm.
You know, they'll respond to any negative blog posts.
How does it
Comments.
say on there how someone might join this group, or is it a closed group, or do you know?
That's a good point. Let me see. Let me see what I see. You know what? I don't see. Okay. I think you can do that on your own. It says, join us.
Okay.
Fallon's Fighters, as we stand up and speak out in support of Fallon Fox to combat this anti-trans athlete bigotry. And and just the way they are fighting. I mean, it's ways that you could just voluntarily, join in on,
that
which is
makes sense.
responding to negative blog posts,
Yeah.
choosing to be above the hurtful language by informing and educating in a respectful way on Fallon's behalf, using
Mhm.
female pronouns,
Mhm.
and correcting those who use incorrect pronouns
Mhm.
to refer to Fallon. So it's really easy to join in. It's just using your voice, it's educating yourself on trans bodies.
But it's specifically, I think it sounds like using that hashtag. So again, like the More Than Marriage, it's streaming these critiques.
Fallon's Fighters.
Right. FALLONS.
Yeah.
Fighters.
Right. So one thing that a lot of people are doing, they're creating videos in support of Fallon Fox, supposedly uploading them to YouTube, create a video responding to any myths involving Fallon or
Nice.
trans athletes.
Nice.
She's not the first trans athlete, there are many.
There are.
And they're just trying to make this difference
Yeah.
in fighting this bigotry that's going on, this trans violence, and it's really scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's really quite frightening, the stuff that you read. When trans people are successful, you just get a lot of controversy in how they got that success because of their trans identity, and it becomes so bigoted and really frightening.
Now we do have one last brief news story that's connected to this in some interesting ways, and we're going to end the show after this with a song by Anthony and the Johnsons.
Yay.
Probably one of my more favorite songs of theirs, even though everything I've ever heard by them is amazing.
Are we playing Origins of Love?
No, we're not. Maybe next time. That's
Okay.
not Anthony and the Johnsons. But we're going to play.
Okay.
Yeah, that's different. We're going to play Cripple and the Starfish.
Who sings Origins of Love?
That comes from Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Oh,
It's from
okay,
the
I'm
musical.
sorry.
No, it's all right. So this last piece is something I personally posted on, what is it called? The Facebooks.
Mhm.
Okay, the article is Hormonal Therapy for Transsexual Patients is Safe, says a study essentially. Yeah, we know. And it's interesting that no one has really ever taken the time to really ask trans people if that's the case, as opposed to just kind of taking the study. So it's interesting. What the study really says is what trans people have known for a long time. Hormones work. HRT, hormone replacement therapy, works. And this came from the Endocrine Society's 95th annual meeting in San Francisco recently. And the study consisted of 45 trans men and 42 trans women at 4 European centers in Ghent, Oslo, Amsterdam, and Florence that specialize in trans treatment. And so really what I'm kind of adding to this, this is again brief, it's just really more substantial evidence supporting that HRT works for trans people, that side effects are minimal. A lot of the side effects, workup tends to be shored up a lot of times from transphobic people who refuse to understand or accept that some people just want access to hormones and what that can and does mean for those particular bodies. So that's kind of where I guess we want to leave the show here as we kind of tune out towards Anthony and the Johnsons. Yeah, is there anything else you want to say this week?
No, I think I'm good.
Oh, no. All right.
Oh, God.
Great. Well, thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Binary. We're going to go and leave you with Anthony and the Johnsons, Cripple and the Starfish. Really great song, some really interesting critiques and analysis has been written about the song and how it connects to transgender bodies, particularly to accessing the building and rebuilding of oneself. So.
Oh, I like that. Well, thank you so much once again for tuning in to Beyond the Binary.
And what's our email address?
Our email address. That's a Gmail account, right?
Yeah.
btbradio. I am just exhausted. At gmail.com.